I hired a digger for the week. It's just a small one, 1.5 tons of yellow, articulated cleverness, but it still cost a small fortune, €500 for the week. Plus diesel, of course. So I didn't want to waste any time. I had a few other jobs around the farm to do, but the main aim is to level the track bed for the new railway. And the first challenge was to get it to the start of the new railway. Some firewood in the way. Sandra Kay came round to help. Thank you, Sandra. Hard work on such a miserable day. If only there was an easier way to move heavy logs. Ooh, wait. We need to cross the existing tracks, 2 sets of tracks in fact. We could have dismantled them and moved them out of the way, but we tried a different strategy. And on the way we met Sandra, my Sandra,
You fashion freezer bag.
who is partly incapacitated at the moment because of an operation on her wrist.
That's how much rain we had in the morning since I cut them one-handed. So I'm going to the donkeys now.
We put some timber slabs on either side of the rails and in between, hoping that the digger would climb up and over and not actually squash the rails. By now the camera was struggling with the damp. Sorry about the foggy footage. Just be happy you weren't paddling about in it too. I took it gently over the rails and it worked fine. No harm done, and now the digger was in the correct place. Just a corner of the old chicken run to come down first. The chickens have all moved down to Sandra's new yard with the other animals, so this run isn't used for hens anymore. And then a small earthen bank. And finally, I'm on the new rail line. Woohoo! Now, I should point out 2 things. This is only my second time using a digger, and this was day 1, so it's all pretty clunky and slow. But no one is born knowing how to drive these things, are they? Well, perhaps there's a remote tribe somewhere called the digger people, maybe. and then the babies there can do it instinctively. But I am not of that tribe. I had to learn. And the second thing is that if I'd been more experienced, then I would have gone back to the hire shop and negotiated a different week somehow. Say it's just too wet. But I didn't know any better. And of course it was still raining. Down at the bottom end of the chicken run there's a hollow, and it was full of water. That's where I'm heading, but the route to it was drier and it went fine under the trees next to the bank. This was my first run through. I was just sort of knocking off the high points, hoping to come back this way later when I'm more competent. But you can see clearly where I reached the soggier part. It's a hollow that needs filling in, otherwise the railway would be more like a roller coaster, and digging out some clay to build up the bed made a small pond. How lovely! You also made a lot of stickiness. You can see where I built up some height, but at the far end there's a real hole with mud and water in the bottom and a steep step at the far side. I need to get up to the other side, but that's nearly 2 feet higher than the bottom of the hole, and it's such a small digger I was worried I'd just topple over or get stuck. And on that day, because it was so sticky I couldn't even get to the end, in fact I had to learn quite quickly how to dig myself out again. The next day I brought some drier topsoil down and I was able to get to the end of the new embankment. But that still left the hole in the ground to negotiate and the steep bank on the far side. Now a bigger digger wouldn't find this a problem at all, I guess, but a bigger digger would have cost more and would need a wider path. And I'm hoping to fit the railway in between the trees and round the corners with minimum changes to the landscape. But of course, if the digger gets stuck, then all my plans would need to change because they'd have to bring a huge digger to get it out. So I couldn't risk trying to carry in some more fill from this end. The added weight would surely just push me down in the mud. So I just filled the hole up with branches. And took a run up through the mud, and it was a bit wobbly, but I made it through to the drier ground. Hooray! Now, this corner on the other side of the hole is the trickiest of the whole route. It's the way around to the field where the ground is firmer and more level, but there's an outcrop of slopey bedrock in the way, which we have to go around. And there's a 4-foot height differential as well between the soggy bottom and the field. Quite a challenge even without the rain. The next day though, the sun shone. Hooray! Look, you can see some of the trees we planted behind. They like our wet climate and we plant more every year. You can see where I've been digging out some fill, made another pond. The plan is to push and pull this clay down into the corner and around the rock to the hole. I need to get some fill in there or else build some sort of bridge. And as I say, there's a 4-foot height difference, so a lot of fill is needed. Look, I'll climb down the muddiness and try to show you. That's where I'm aiming for. And that's where the field level is. And guess what? It started raining again. Diggers just can't cope with wet mud. Surprising, isn't it? But it's true. So I decided to postpone that wet corner, which is too wet, and concentrate instead on the field. The route I chose is reasonably level, so I just went backwards and forwards, smoothing it as best as I could. I don't know the official way to do this. I did try the dozer bar at the front of the digger, but it was too slow and unresponsive to keep level. Then this way worked better for me because I could adjust the height of the bucket constantly and quite effectively, I think, whilst I was going along backwards. But holding the camera at the same time made it more tricky. And then it was time to try to make it back through the corner. Rain or shine, my week was running out and there were still other jobs to do. I took as much fill with me as I dared because I knew this was going to be a one-way journey if I was lucky. I tried to film this with the camera in my teeth, but I dropped it, sorry. And I was just concentrating anyway too hard on driving and not tipping over. So jumping ahead a little, you can see that I did make it through around the rocky outcrop to the far side, or the near side in fact, and I did pull quite a bit of fill with me, and here I am on this side of the hole again. Still too low, but at least there's now a track bed all the way around into the field. A muddy track bed for sure, but at least it's there. So now it's just a matter of getting it as level as I could, pulling up fill from the sides. Except I found a pipe I wasn't expecting, full of water that wanted to get out in a hurry. Hey. And it was getting dark too. The problem was, if I left this to run all night, the digger would surely be deep in a pond by morning. So I improvised with a stick to block the pipe, an industrial grade emergency stick of course, and dug myself out as fast as I could. The next day I was able to build up the embankment quite well. Too sticky to leave a flat top, but at least the material is there now, so we can do the rest by hand. Well, you know, not by hand, by shovel and mattock. And by the time it was on the drier slope, it all seemed so easy in comparison. Making a level track bed was a surprisingly steep learning curve, but I liked it. I was much better by the end. Perhaps I'll be a digger driver when I grow up. What marvellous machines they are! Now you might be thinking, that's not a track bed, Tim, that's just a sloppy heap of mud. But that's where the wonder of light railways comes in. I am confident that I can just sling some sleepers down on this mud and they would hold up rails that would hold up a half-ton wagon with no problems at all, simply because the sleepers spread the weight so well. In the peat bogs of the Irish Midlands, they ran heavy turf railways over the soggy bogland using nothing but bushes underneath to hold up the railway lines, and it worked Now later they did upgrade to rolls of heavy material that spread the weight better, but in the beginning it was just brushwood that they harvested nearby, and if they can do that with full-size trains, then I can certainly do it with a 15-inch gauge one. And consider the alternative. If I put in a roadway in here instead for a tractor and a trailer, for instance, or even for a horse and cart, I would have needed to remove all the soft stuff first and then fit it in again with rock. The cost would have been huge. As it is, this embankment is 4 feet high in places, but that's built on a couple more feet of soft clay underneath, and that would have had to come out first, so that's a lot of material. I would have needed a dumper to remove the spoil and bring in the stone, and of course someone somewhere else would need to be breaking rock out of the mountain and to bring it to the farm. I bet there wouldn't have been any change out of €5,000 just for the soggy bit I showed you today. So basically, railways are brilliant, unsurpassed, and everyone should have one. And I now have 250 meters of new track bed just sitting there waiting for a railway. Can't wait. Woohoo!